Welcome to the Athlete's First Performance Podcast. This podcast is focused on providing evidence-based information for human performance and sports medicine professionals. Welcome to episode 23 of the Athlete's First Performance Podcast. Today, my guest is Javy Ramirez. Javy, thanks for hopping on.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to being here.
Oh yeah, I think this is going to be a good episode. So for the listeners that don't know who you are yet, why don't you give us a little background about where you're from, how you grew up, and so on.
Cool. Yeah. So, like you mentioned, Javy Ramirez grew up mainly in Virginia. I did live in Texas for about 5 or 6 years when I was younger, um, and then but mostly in Virginia. Um, Arlington, born in Arlington, lived a little bit outside of the DC area in called a place called Manassas. Went to high school out there, um, and then from there, 17 years old, joined the Navy. Um, and then after that, just freaking moved around. It was basic training was in Great Lakes. After that, you go to A school in Mississippi, Connecticut, and then I went back to Virginia. Then I went back to Connecticut, and then from there, I'm sure we'll get into it. Just moved all over the country due to the coaching profession. So
Yeah, so I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on. You've had a unique experience. We're both working in the tactical human performance field now, and I think it always helps you being in the military previously and having that experience and bringing that wealth of knowledge to our current population. I think that plays a huge role compared to someone like me who was kind of learning on the fly when I first got into the military setting. Um, but let's rewind a little bit. Growing up, did you play any sports, or what were you involved in growing up?
yeah, so it's always kind of like one of those things where it's like you ask yourself, it's like, well, all right, everyone played like sports, but it was like soccer, basketball, and like just general like participation in sports. So I always like a little bit hesitant to tell people, yeah, I played like sports, but it was when you're like 10 years old, like everyone's playing sports, everyone's like chasing the soccer ball in that huge group of circle, and like there's no actual like good soccer being played or anything like that. So I guess you can say, yeah, I played sports. In high school, though, I did get into my senior year. Is when I great time to start playing football is when you're a senior in high school. That
Yeah,
was my
exactly.
first exposure to organized football, so I had no idea what I was doing. But I kind of got into that because um, I was taking a football class, and it was like flag football. And the football coach saw that I was just out there dusting dudes, just smoking kids, running the straight go route every time. And he like pulled me aside and he's like, "Hey, I want you to come play football." I was like, "All right, whatever." Um, Still had no idea what I was doing. But I was best. I was the best scout team player. Out there. But yeah, so it was football in high school. Played soccer growing up. Um, kind of lost it as I kind of got into middle school, and then I tried to get back into it in high school. I went for like a tryout, and I got gassed. I forgot how much running there was, and didn't make the team. Um, and then there was a so the area I grew up in, it's not like a bad area, but there was some gang violence, gang affiliation, whatever you want to call it, in the area. I think there was a couple of like there was a news story of a lady that actually ended up getting murdered and she was pregnant. So at the time, people were kind of like freaking out about it. So they're like, we got to give these kids something to do. Um, so they started like a boxing program. Um, Shoot, I forgot. I think it was like 7 rounds. I forget what it was called. But they dumped a whole lot of money into the boxing program. They had like a whole ring. There was this guy that won the Golden Gloves. We had a bunch of new equipment, and all this stuff. He was coaching us up, so I did a little bit of that as well. Kind of got tired of getting hit in the face though, so I quit that. When you're 5'4" and you're fighting dudes that are like 6'1", 6'2", it's like you're just they're just standing on the outside, bing, 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 and I'm just so it's got tired of that, so I kind of quit that. But yeah, just I would say organized football and then a little bit of boxing and soccer growing up.
No. Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, it sounds like you've been exposed to a lot of different sports and different environments. And I think it's super important for kids to understand what it feels like to have some type of being like physical or contact sports, right? So like boxing, football. I think that goes a long way, just in life in general. Like for me, football was my thing. So I think that definitely plays a huge role growing up and kind of developing in that nature. And then you kind of touched on joining the Navy. What was that decision like? How did you decide to join the military and ultimately land on the Navy?
So it was I always had um some sort of, I don't know if it's infatuation or look up to or something with the military. I remember they used to have these old posters of like the Marines, and like their faces were painted in black, and it was like this dude coming out of the water, and I had that poster in the back of my wall, and I was like a young child, um, so I don't know if it was just I always had exposure to it or what, but I always just kind of gravitated towards the military. Um, so when it was time, when I never good at school, I still not, but I just learned how to apply myself a little bit better. But senior year, you're thinking about what you're gonna do. Do you want to go to school? Do you want to do something else? Um, so my mom, being the great mom that she is, she tried to push me towards that college route in which she signed me up for the SAT. She bought me like the SAT prep stuff. She made me study. She was on my butt about looking into colleges. She signed me up for a this she signed me up for like a college tour, and we were living in Virginia, and the tour was it took us to a bunch of HBCUs in uh, in like Southern Virginia. So we went to like Hampton University, we went to like Norfolk State, um, and I was just like kind of like that's my exposure to like colleges. I'm like, this really isn't for me. Um, but she tried to expose me to everything, to kind of give me options. Um, but I again, like I always kind of just gravitated towards the military. So I walked into the high school, the career center, like they have all the pamphlets and stuff like that, and I just went straight to the military one and just got in touch with a. I went to the recruiting office, and at the time, the Navy dude was the only one that was in there. So I just I walked in there and kind of just told him I was interested in joining, and after that, it's just a whole lot of paperwork.
Yeah. Did you have any idea of what you wanted to do in the Navy?
Yeah. So this is funny. I wanted to be. I At the time I was huge into like sports and like ESPN, and I would watch Cold Pizza and Stephen A. Smith and those guys. So I wanted to be a journalist. Um, I think at the time it was like a mass communications. So with each job, there's a required ASVAB score that you need. Um, and me being not the studious person that I was, I took my ASVAB, um, and they sat me down. I was like, "Hey, this is what I want to do," and they were like, "Well, your ASVAB score isn't high enough for that." So I was like, "All right, well, what is it high enough for?" So then they give you like these jobs that like, "Hey, this is what you would qualify for." Um, So they told me storekeeper. I was like, all right, well, what is that? He kind of told me what that was, and it's like it's essentially supply. So I was like, all right, well, fine. I just want to get in. I just want to get into the military. And like, fine, whatever, I'll do it. Um, so then he asked me about being on board submarines, and at the time, I was just like, didn't really know. Like I'm just this kid from freaking Virginia. Like it's who's ever heard of submarines? Like I don't even remember knowing about it. So he asked me about submarines. I was like, I'm not really sure. Then he brings this other guy in to talk to me, and this other guy like takes me to into a whole different office. He kind of sits me down, and I'm like 17 years old, so I'm pretty impressionable. And he's telling me he's hyping it up. He's just like, you get more pay, the food is better, the camaraderie is better. You don't want to be on a carrier because that's 5,000 people. You're gonna get lost in the bunch. Like you're not gonna stand out. You're not gonna be different. Um, and my mom at the time she kind of told me like, hey, if you're gonna do this, like you know you need to do like, you need to be the best, and I'm not saying subs are the best, but, like, it's different. Like, the submarine community is very small. Um, so I was just like, "Alright, well, shoot, I guess I'll just do it." So, you know, signed up for subs, and then signed up to be a supply guy, and, yeah.
So I know we've talked a little bit offline and at work. What does it mean to be on sub? Like, how long are you away, or how long are you underwater, and things like that?
Yeah, so there's two different types. You got the fast attack submarine, so that's what I was on, which is it's a little bit smaller, and then you have the boomers. Well, there's three types now, I guess. You have the boomers, so those are the ones that carry the nuclear weapons, and then some of those boomers got converted into SSGNs, which is for guided. They carry guided missiles, so more tomahawks. Their payload is just a little bit bigger than the fast attack. Um, so the fast attack, our job was mainly for reconnaissance, super secret spy stuff, um, escort. When a carrier strike group, they go out. You got the carriers, and then they have all of the ships that accompany those carriers. That's called a strike group. When they go out, we usually go out before them to kind of make sure everything is good. Um, Kind of like just paving the way, make sure there's nothing sketchy going on. Um, so that was what I was on, was the fast attack. And in terms of like time underwater, it was each mission will vary. The most we did was 60 plus days, um, just because a mission, you're on a mission, they're planning on pulling you guys into the pier, something happens, you got to go out and do another mission. That's kind of just like the nature of the beast. So 60 plus days, but again, it depends on the mission. Sometimes you're out there for there would be times where if there was a hurricane coming towards the base, we would have to go out to sea because the hurricane's coming. We don't want to get beat up on the pier. So sometimes that would just be like 2 or 3 days, but depending on the mission.
That's wild. I couldn't imagine being gone 60 days on a submarine. What are some of your best experiences during that time? Like, any crazy stories pop up, or what do you remember most about that time?
I mean, so many stories. I would say, but the best time. Well, okay, there was one. So we were in a hurricane. Um, Yeah, we were in a hurricane essentially. Um, but we're underwater, obviously. So you would think that you know, you're underwater, like hundreds of feet underwater. You wouldn't be able to feel anything. But we were, I mean, it was just crazy. And this is hundreds of feet underwater. So you're like, and the thing with subs is you have a communications window. Um, Usually it's 24 hours, but when you're on certain missions, it can kind of get extended. So if you don't communicate within those 24 hours, that's when like everything like the shit hits the fan. Like people are like they're sending out signals and like stuff like that. So you have to come up and communicate. You have to send out messages. Um, So we had to come up to send out those messages. So we kind of get up, we go up the wave, you're rocking back and forth more and more. And I remember there's this guy, he's like this thing about like the saltiest sailor that you've ever met or can imagine. He's got like the old school Popeye tattoos, like, and he's kind of like he's got the dip in his mouth. At the time, you could smoke. He's like smoking. Um, you know, been in the Navy for 30 years, so he's probably seen it all. Um, and he has never thrown up, ever thrown up out to sea. And that night, he was puking his brains out. It was just, that's when I was like, okay, this is pretty bad. like,
That's
like
how you know it's bad.
I was like, this is not normal.
Yeah, that's
um,
wild.
so there's that, and then like just like my favorite memories are just being out to sea, um, like you have to you're not always underwater when you're coming in when you're pulling into port. You have to surface the boat. I think it's 20 nautical miles outside of the port, and then you're just cruising along. So I was a lookout, so I was one of the first ones up. Um, so it was just I just remember like you're on the water, it's calm seas, like it's midnight. Um, at the time, I smoked cigarettes. Um, I just had a cigarette, and like you're just laying on top of the submarine and just looking at the moon and the stars, and it's just like it's like it's like one of those things where it's like, man, this is crazy. Like I'm like under the stars on a submarine.
Yeah, not too many people can have that experience and say they've been on a submarine, let alone just hanging out in the middle of the ocean, right?
Yeah, it was pretty
Um,
cool.
no, that's awesome. So, at what point in the Navy did you get introduced to strength conditioning, or how did you decide to get into this field of strength conditioning?
So I've always kind of been into lifting, working out, training, since I was like probably in high school. Um, we had that old school gym set that had the had like the concrete and it was like wrapped in the plastic. It had that like really narrow like bench, like you had to go outside of the thing
Hmm.
to pick it up. Um, so it's always been into lifting and working out. Now when you're on the boat, that kind of you can't really well, some people do, but it's not like where you can be consistent, right? You're working so much. You're on a submarine, so it's not like you have a fully equipped gym. You got like the Bowflex adjustable dumbbells. You got a treadmill and like a pull-up bar. Um, so you do what you can. But when I went to so you do sea duty and then you do shore duty. So when you're on sea duty, you're on the boat, you're operational, you're going on missions, you're doing deployments and stuff. When you rotate to shore duty, your job is then to support the units that are going out to sea. So when I went to shore duty, you get more downtime. You kind of have more time to yourself, and you can kind of focus on, um, other things. So that's when I kind of jumped into the fitness realm more. So at that time in 2011, I got stationed in Groton, Connecticut, which is a submarine base. That's also where submarine school is. I joined a CrossFit gym. So that's when I really started to kind of get interested in um, working out, coaching, and that's when I kind of well, it wasn't just myself. I had the help of some really good people around me. The goal was that we were all going to get certified CrossFit Level 1, and we were going to work at the gym. Um, things happened that it ended up happening, but we I still ended up getting Level 1 certified, and that's kind of how I came into like the strength and conditioning and coaching realm.
Yeah, I mean, people love or hate CrossFit either way, but I think it really just brought a good base of like got barbells in people's hands, introduced people to Olympic lifting and conditioning. So, love it or hate it, I think CrossFit did make a big impact throughout the military at that time, but also in just like the general public. So you got your CrossFit one, and then what led you to becoming like a strength conditioning coach outside of that?
Yeah, so got the level 1. At the time, I was still in the military. I knew I was going to get out. Um, this was in 2014. I knew I was gonna get out and I was gonna go home and live with my mom. But I didn't really know what I was gonna do. So I think I got out in October, went home, moved home, and then I was like, well, I want to keep working out. So I ended up getting a job at a gym because I was like, I might as well work at a gym so I can get like a free gym membership. So I was the front desk. I was the front desk guy, was scanning people in, taking phone calls, doing all this stuff at the gym. Um, and that January is when I started going to college. So that is when I George Mason University, and I was in the kinesiology program. So at that, when I was going to school, I was working at the gym. Months go by, kind of doing my thing in school, but I'm kind of getting more interested in the training aspect because you're in kinesiology. You're now learning like the basics of training, right? The anatomy and physiology and all that stuff. So it started to pique my interest more. Um, so I would see these people. They would have these cool like black shirts and like neon lettering, and like they were fit and they were cool and they looked athletic. And I was like, oh man, those people look cool. And they're always training athletes. So I was like, man, I wonder what they do. So the company was called Explosive Performance, um, and they essentially modeled their program and training off of Exos. So I just that's when I started like, at picking their brains, asking questions like, what do I need to do this? All this stuff. And this is where people like hate on the fitness industry because I was like, all right, well, I want to be a trainer. I want to be a performance coach. So they were like, okay, we'll help you out. So I took a 1 month certification, a test, and then passed it. And they were like, all right, you're ready to train people. So I was just like, all right, well, shoot, here it is. Here we go. Um, so that's when I started training people is uh, when I got that certification. I started working with um, all kinds of clients, adults, general population adults. I had a kids class. I had an adult performance class. We used to sign up teams to train. Um, just all kinds of people. A lot of exposure to different populations. A lot of exposure to people of different abilities, and just getting my coaching hours in.
Yeah, I know you talked about people kind of hate on the fitness industry for that. But I mean, how useful is it getting that experience working with those different populations, getting hours of just coaching, teaching, watching movement? I think that's huge because you can be as smart as you want, you can get all straight A's in the classroom, but if you don't have that actual experience working with people, coaching people, I mean, you're not gonna improve as a coach. So I think that's huge. I mean, ideally, we'd want people to be qualified, but just getting those hours and being on the floor is huge for growth and development.
Yeah, and like, and again, it's like, and this is where I disagree with a lot of my professors because they had this incremental like, hey, you're supposed to follow these steps, right? You're not supposed to do your internships until your senior year, your junior or senior year, right? But I was getting exposure to that in my freshman and sophomore year. I was taking what I was learning from the class and actually applying it. And this is what this is my advice I give undergrad people is you got to start getting your experience when you're in your undergrad because when you graduate, now you're ready. Now you can say, hey, this is what I did. I have my experience. I have my relevant experience. I have my coaching hours. I put in the work. And that helped me out tremendously because, and again, like I learned by doing. So it's like, all right, well, I'm learning this in school. Now I'm actually applying it in a practical setting. Um, and then the other part of that is I always tell people if you can coach a kids group, like you can coach anybody. Trying to get
Yeah.
little 9-year-olds locked in is not easy.
Yeah, I mean, you hear it all the time, like all these professional strength conditioning coaches and even the high D1. I mean, those guys are coming in, they already know how to move for the most part, right? So you're
Yeah,
just adding the topping on the dessert, but you get those youth, elementary, middle school kids, you're their first introduction to strength conditioning. So you're rewriting the book there. You're starting from a blank slate and you can have a huge impact on them as long as
yeah,
you coach them right.
yeah. That's the hard part.
Yeah, exactly. So, where'd you go from there? So you're going through school. You started getting some experience on the floor. What were your next steps?
Yeah, so again, like, it was a performance company. Their main goal was to train athletes. Um, so they would do a lot of staff education and a lot of clinics with people around the area, different performance companies, podcasts. They would do all kinds of things. Um, so we ended up partnering with it's called Smarter Team Training, and his name is Rob Taylor. I think he trains out of the Baltimore area. Um, but they did a lot of collaborative educational stuff. So I heard him talk one time, and I was like, "Man, this guy's freaking electric! Like, this guy's awesome! Like, his enthusiasm is just crazy." So looked him up, researched him, and then ended up listening to like his podcast. And I was again very impressionable. So you know, he would bring on like strength coaches, strength conditioning coaches, and they would kind of say, you know, they would kind of go over their path too, like how they got into strength and conditioning. They did their internships, they did this, they did that. They reached out to people, networking. They sent out 3 emails a day to coaches around the area. Hey, can I come visit? Can I come do a site visit? All this other stuff. They mentioned social media. Populate your timeline with what you want to be. Right? If you want to be a strength coach, then you need to populate your timeline with strength and conditioning stuff. All right. And I took that stuff to heart. So I, sent out my emails. I found the website, Strength Scoop, started following all these people, listened to a bunch of different podcasts. I would listen to, what's the CrossFit football guys? Um,
Oh, power athlete.
Power Athlete. I would listen to Power Athlete a lot. Um, and then kind of just from there, it was like, all right, well, these are the steps that I need to take if I want to be a collegiate strength coach. So let me go do that. So there was a podcast that the Power Athlete did with his name is Jim Carizzi, at Kennesaw State. So I kind of like had a list of like people that I wanted to intern for. Um, it was like guys like Tommy Moffitt, Paul Jackson was one of them, and then Coach Carizzi was another one. It was like my dream list. Um, LSU, I did apply to LSU. I heard back and they were like, "Hey, can you send us a video of you like it was like doing a snatch, a clean and jerk, like a squat and like a front squat." I was like, "All right, well, this is kind of weird, but whatever, I'll do it." And at the time, like I hadn't like my shoulders, they hadn't gotten
Mhm.
in like 10 years. At the time, I hadn't really been doing like full snatches, so I like recorded myself. I had like, I had like 10 pounds on the side.
I'm sure they were impressed with that.
So I didn't get that internship.
Okay. Okay.
But ended up reaching out to Kennesaw State, Coach Carizzi. Emailed him, sent the resume, did 3 references, all that stuff, and I heard back. I was like, "Oh man, this is gonna be great!" Like, but the person that emailed me back, the name was Ellis Spratlin, and I didn't know like the name if it was like a male or a female. Like Ellis is kind of like to me is like a in between. Um, so he called me, and I'm like, yes, ma'am. It's a dude. I was
Yeah.
like, "Yes!" So we
Oh.
go through the whole intern like, we go through the interview and all that, and, I'm like thinking I bombed it just because I called him ma'am, and um, that wasn't the case. I actually ended up getting it and moved down to Atlanta for the summer. Stayed with my ex's what were they? Like her uncle or something. I like stayed in like some room outside of Atlanta, and it was one of the greatest experiences I had. That was my first internship in strength and conditioning. This was back in 2017. Um, and then from there, it was just like, all right, I know this is what I want to do. Like, this is it. This is going to be my job. Um, so did the summer internship there, went back home, and then from there it was the year I ended up interning for George Mason, George Mason Sports Performance. Interned with them in the fall and the spring, and then um, I actually wanted to intern at Maryland with Maryland football. I ended up meeting that staff at a clinic again at that sports performance place that I used to work at. They held a clinic and they had the Maryland staff there. Um, and you talk about like just absolutely dudes. Like, they walk in, they're wearing their Under Armour gear, like they're all like 6'3",
Mm.
6'4", like 250. I'm like, oh, look at these guys. Like these guys look
Yeah.
cool. Um, and like they got their raspy voices, their coaching voices and like all that stuff. And I'm like, oh man, these guys are so freaking cool. They give a presentation on like neck training. And I'm like, oh, this is freaking awesome. Um, so I again, like I do my thing, my networking thing, email them, reach out to them, end up getting an interview in the at the actual facility. Um, but didn't get it. And, like, I went into it pretty cocky. I was like, "Oh, I already did a football internship. I'm a veteran, like, these guys would be stupid not to accept me." Um, didn't get it. So, um, at that time, that's when I just stayed, I kept working at the sports performance facility, um, still went to school, and then the following year is when I got it. I kept in touch with the coaching staff at Maryland, and then ended up interning with them in the following summer. So again, like if people hear this or whatever, it's like, hey, like you might get turned down, but like always keep in touch. One, you never know who's going to be able to help you, and two, like there's going to be other opportunities. There's going to be more opportunities too. So um, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing a lot of like grit, determination, and networking, right? Um, for the listeners that don't know, like strength conditioning, that's a field where you're constantly moving around, you're networking, and it's tough to get into it, right? So, how many times have you moved so far as a strength conditioning coach? It's quite a bit, isn't it?
All right, so I don't know if you want to count like the internships, but we'll just for the sake of it. So moved to Atlanta for a couple of months. Okay. Now, luckily, I lived in that Virginia area, so I was able to still live at home and do the internship at Maryland. All right, so we got that going for me. I still had to wake up at 3:30 just to drive there, though. Um, so from there, I ended up getting a graduate assistant position at Tusculum University, which is a small D2 in East Tennessee. So moved there, lived there for 10 months. Ended up getting a, I don't know how the hell this happened, but it happened. It's because I interviewed well and I'm really good. Ended up getting a head strength conditioning position at a small D2 in New Hampshire, Rindge, New Hampshire. Not a lot there. So lived there for about almost 2 years. Um, Ended up moving to Miami to work with Florida International University. Was there for 6 months, and then moved out to Reno, Nevada. Um, and then I was there for 2 years, and then from Reno, I am now here in Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Yeah, beautiful North Carolina.
Yeah.
So for the listeners, a lot of our listeners are strength and conditioning coaches, physical therapists. What are your biggest recommendations for like networking, right? Because you have to network to get these different positions, especially at these uh, D1 schools, right? So, what's your biggest recommendation for those that want to get into those positions for networking?
It's it's I'm gonna say, because I don't think it's changed, I'm gonna say it's the same thing that people told me. It's, if you're a student, find like a 30-mile radius, look at all the schools in that radius, and reach out to every single one of those coaches. And then, hey, email them. Hey, I'm a student. This is my name, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm interested in strength and conditioning. Can I come do a site visit? Most likely they're gonna say yes. All right. So, that's what I would do is email, site visits, social media. Social media is huge, right? Populate your timeline with what you want to be, right? If that's what you want to be, then that's what you need to be exposed to. And now you have so many avenues that you can do that, right? If you see them like some sort of like training modality that they're doing, like ask them about it. Like, hey, what are you using this for? Or, give me some context to this. Or, oh, great stuff, coach. Like, coaches have huge egos. Like, boost their ego up a little bit more. Um, Social media, like that. Those are all things that like it doesn't take a lot of effort, and it will go a long way. Um, you do those site visits, reach out to people, continuously reach out to them. I think people have this in their mind where it's like, oh, yeah, I texted this guy last year, we're good buddies. It's like, no, you got to do it like continuously. Like I used to like it was around the holidays. It was around like hey, if I knew that they were getting ready for fall camp, I'd shoot them a message like, "Hey, good luck to you. Hope all of your guys stay healthy." If it was a big game, you'd be like, "Hey, big game coming up. Good luck to you guys." Like, just little things like that to kind of keep my name in the back of their head to kind of always stay relevant. It's like little things like that can go far away. I always tell my former interns this is like people don't want to hire people they don't know, right? Like you spend
Mhm.
so many hours, so many days, like with the people that you're around in the strength and conditioning setting, like they want to make sure that you're a good dude. Like, like people don't want to hire people they don't know.
Yeah, I think that's huge, especially for people just kind of coming up in the human performance field, right? Just get your name out there, talk to as many people as you can, stay in touch with people, right? Because you never know who's going to come back around, and then don't burn bridges. So leave on a good note, keep in contact with people, and so
And
on.
and it's gotta be genuine too, because people can kind of read it when it's like, okay, well, this guy's just kind of um, you know, checking the box, right? Like don't be fake about it either. Like make sure it's a genuine connection.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. So you kind of bounced around and went to a whole bunch of different universities. How did you get into the tactical setting with H2F? How did you hear about that?
All right, so c- rewinding, and again, like this is where I want to clear some things up because people will like we didn't have very good seasons at Nevada, so people might insinuate like, oh, you're just getting out of there. Like,
Mhm.
so to rewind back, what I mentioned Rob Taylor and Smarter Team Training. So he had some guys on his podcast, Jay Merlino and Tom Palumbo, which I think they're still in it. I think they're still in the tactical setting. Um, so he had those two guys on his podcast, and he was asking about tactical. So what did I do? I emailed him. I said, "Hey, like I'm a veteran. I'm also a student in a kinesiology program, interested in being a strength and conditioning coach. Um, can you speak to me a little bit more about this tactical stuff?" Um, so I get this huge long email. He's like, "Hey, these are the steps that you want to take, and this is who we're kind of looking for." So those steps, again, like I take things pretty literal. I'm pretty impressionable. They were like, get your degree, get your CSCS, 5 years of collegiate football. they were looking for football, specifically. And again, like, I didn't get into football for that reason, but it kinda helped me out. So it was kinda like, "Alright, well, this is what I need to do if I wanna be in this tactical setting." So, fast forward, I always had it in the back of my head, and one of the coaches at Maryland was actually a tactical guy, like, he came from, MARSOC, so I would kinda pick his brain as well. So it was always kind of in the back of my head as a not necessarily like a fallback plan, but like a the way I saw it was like a this is gonna sound bad, but whatever. It's like a strength coach retirement, right? Because like you're going in like collegiate athletics, it's just go, 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 get after it, get after it, get after it. And I hear these things about tactical is like, this is where you can actually have a life. Um, so it was always in the back of my head, like, hey, I want to give my best in the collegiate setting. I want to do everything I can. And then when I'm ready to kind of settle down, have a family, buy a house, and all that stuff, that's when I'll transition to tactical. Um, so it was kind of I was always where my feet were, but it was always the plan to kind of go there. It just got accelerated. Um, I had known about H2F for a little bit. I've always kind of kept my eyes on the tactical setting. Um, but when I kind of knew that I wanted to transition, that's when I started reaching out to more coaches about it. Um, Reached out to like Frank Wintridge, who was I ended up reaching out to a lot of coaches that were like college guys that I knew were getting out of it. Um, so Frank Wintridge, who was like the UCLA head football guy, like he ended up going to H2F. So I reached out to him. You guys know Tony. I reached out to Tony. I reached out to a bunch of coaches and kind of just picked their brains and like, um, kind of knew what I was getting into. So that's how kind of I fell into it. But like again, like it was kind of always the plan.
Was there any interest in going back to the Navy, or was it just tactical in general that you were interested in?
Yeah, the Navy doesn't really PT like that. So
No, or like Navy, like special operations. I'm sure they have performance teams and things like that.
yeah,
Was that it? Yeah,
obviously the glitz and the glamour or like
yeah.
the and again like it's like when you're a young intern it's like oh I want to intern for Ohio State and I want to work for them and work. Like that's the goal, right? The
Hmm.
special operations, but I think that with H2F and with what I'm seeing now is um this population is probably the one that can benefit the most from the expertise that a lot of collegiate strength coaches can bring. Um, so because there is a lot of work to be done. Um, so I feel a little bit better about being here because I know the impact is going to be huge.
Yeah, that's what I hear a lot when people talk about and try to compare special operations to H2F. And I'm hearing the same thing. I think it's still a relatively new program, right? And this is a population that hasn't been exposed to human performance. So, what we're able to bring is a huge impact on changing people's lives in terms of mental, sleep, nutrition, physicality, things of that nature. So, it's been a great experience and it's only going to get better. Um, so I know that you've posted about this a couple times on LinkedIn. I think I've seen, but like, what are the biggest differences between being in college football and training the military population? I think this is a hot topic because a lot of coaches came in from college football and trying to train the soldiers the same way, and it hasn't worked out. It's not the same.
Yeah, so I have a lot of opinions on this, and I know I'm probably going to rub people the wrong way or whatever, but I don't really care. Um, so the way I kind of see it is we are here as the subject matter experts. Um, and we are here to assist and advise, right? Um, Now, me being a former NCO, being a former junior enlisted, um, and also being a former command fitness leader, I would be in charge of some of the workouts. Like I understand for the most part what goes on in the NCO's head when it's like you got to lead workouts, right? Um, if we're here, like, why not use us? That's the way I kind of see it. Like, why not allow that? Um, and again, I understand like conceptually, I'm not dumb. I understand the concept of it. You wanted it to be NCO led, but conceptually, it doesn't always mean it's going to be put into practice perfectly or how it should be. Um, so, with that being said, it's again we've seen it. We've seen it at the highest levels. How to run a group, the logistics of running a workout, um, how you need to command presence, right? And that doesn't mean yelling and screaming and having a whistle. Like you can still have presence without that. Um, it's the environment that you create, right? Are you creating an environment that people want to train in, right? Like, like take a step back as a coach, look from the outside and be like, would I do this workout? Like, would you really do this workout? Like, ask yourself that. Like, I know there's a lot of people that wouldn't. They're like, oh, this is stupid, right? Um, so those are the kind of things that you got to think about. Is like, are you creating the environment? Um, are you are you showing them how to lead a session? Are you showing them how to lead a warm up? Are you teaching them how to lead a warm up? Are you teaching them presence? Are you teaching them where to stand when they're looking at a squat? Right? Like those are all things that that we can kind of help out with more. To me, it's less about the anatomy and physiology, the Krebs cycle, and it's more about just how to run a session. Right? I think that's where they can get the most value is. And again, like people want to talk about equipment limitations. I worked at two D2s. All we had were racks and barbells and a little bit of dumbbells. We still like that wasn't a you think you're gonna go to the football coach and tell him, "Hey, coach, like that, like we can't get any good training. That's all we got." He's gonna find somebody else that can figure it out. Like equipment limitations, that's not an excuse. Like you got to figure it out. When COVID happened, freaking 4 years ago, 4 years ago,
Yeah,
what
close to it. Yeah,
people were their imaginations were going crazy. Like they were able to figure things out, right? Like the human mind is amazing. The human spirit is amazing. Like you can figure things out. Like um, and I'm going on a tangent here, but it's like it's still it still needs to be good training. You can still provide value. Um, yeah.
yeah. How much has it helped you? I know you talked about it a little bit, but like being a former NCO and being in the military setting, how much has that helped you adjust into this setting currently? Because I know it took me about a year to understand what the military was all about, the structure, and how things worked.
I don't. It's been I don't want to say it's been easy, but it's kind of like when you can kind of talk the same language, and you can understand where they're coming from. It helps the relationships aspect be a little bit easier, right? Because it's still all about relationships. Like we're in a human, um, we deal with humans, right? It's all about
Mhm.
relationships. So it helps with that. Um, and again, it also helps with like being relatable, right? It's like, hey, I get it, man. I stood the watch. Like I was on watch for 24 hours too. Like you're tired the next day. You got to do a full work day. Um, you know, we had pet our ours. Their sergeants, I guess. We're petty officers. Like petty officer is getting on me for this and that, and like I get it, dude. Um, it helps with that too. So it kind of just and again like pe- uh, I don't know. It's just like It I just feel like I can kind of have a more normal conversation with a lot of those people. Whereas like some people might not know how to um address them or confront them or anything like that. Where I'm just like kind of just be normal.
Yeah. I think it does play a huge role. People that are have been exposed to the military or been in the military previously, I think they make an easy transition to working with this population, especially from what I've seen so far. I think it's a great way to kind of blend the two, blend H2F team with the soldiers or whatever unit that you are working with, just based on your experiences. So I know I think it's awesome, and I've definitely seen that easy transition with you stepping in. Um, on the other side, what has been the hardest part, either coaching wise or just even moving here? What's been the hardest transition to working here in this population?
The most difficult, and it continues to be the most difficult, is the time off.
Is
I
it's different.
I have no idea what to do with my time. And this is like I remember I forget what it was. I think it was we came back from the holidays and then like we I think it was like a couple weeks later we had like a 4-day weekend. And I remember I was just like so mad. I was just like, why do we have a 4-day? Like
Yeah.
we just had the holidays. Like what are we doing? Like and I was just like I was telling a friend of mine, I was like, I never thought I'd be pissed to have like a 4-day weekend, but like it was just it's the time off, like managing that, knowing what to kind of do with that time. You got to kind of like when you're coaching, it like it demands all of you. It demands everything you have because what you're doing is important um, in the collegiate sector, right? It kind of takes that's your identity, and I didn't really know how to separate that, like Javi as a person and Javi as a coach. To me, they were blended. Um,
Mhm.
so when you do that, you don't really have any hobbies. Your hobby is reading strength and conditioning books, or listening to podcasts, or something to get better. Um, didn't have any hobbies, didn't know what to do with my free time, all that stuff. So when I come here, you have all this time off. It's like, oh shoot, like what am I gonna do? So that's been like the hardest part is just figuring out um, what to do with all the time off, which I guess is a good thing. Like maybe I'll learn some fishing or something.
Yeah. I mean, you're not too far from the ocean. There's lots of lakes around here. But you
Well,
are working on something on the side, right? What are you
yes,
working on? What are you
yes.
currently working on?
Um, so that is also a plus of this is you have the time off, you have all this experience, all this knowledge that you've kind of gathered throughout the years, and it's like, all right, well, how can I put this out to everybody? How can I help people doing what I know is to be helpful? So dabbling in the online training, online programming. Program is coming out soon. It's actually dropping today. I'm very nervous. See how it goes. Um, but yeah, just kind of now it's like I have all these athletes that I've trained. They're all kind of getting a little bit older now, 25, 26, 27, and now it's like they want to kind of stay athletic. They want to stay they want to show people they still got it. And um, I've had a lot of them reach out to me and be like, "Hey, can you send me a program? Can you do this? Can you do that? Or whatever." And it's like, I never really had the time for it. So I'd honestly tell them like, "Hey, I'm sorry. I'm fully like we're in season. Like, sorry." But now I do have the time, so it's like, let me help them out.
No, I think that's great. I think a lot of human performance is shifting into that, using the app based training or PDF based training, so remote coaching. I think it's a great way just to spread knowledge, and athletes are looking for it, right? They have the gyms that even garage gyms, but
Yeah,
they're probably sick of doing the same thing that they used to do 10 years ago in college. I know the first couple of years after I got done playing football, I just reran the same workouts over and over again from winter conditioning,
yeah,
summer, and things like that. I had my buddies that were still playing send me the program that they were doing because I just didn't know where to find a good program. So I think that's huge. And I think
yeah.
it's just going to keep on getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing is that one of the things that came out of COVID was the ability to now do it through the phone and have the access there. Everything is linked to videos. It's really easy to kind of implement. Like you said, all you need is the gym, and the program is there for you.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So why don't you shout it out? What's the name of the program and where can people find it?
The program is called The Awakening. Awaken your spirit.
Yeah, I like
Um,
it.
it's on. You can go to my Instagram. It's Javy Javy underscore R perform. Um, the link is in the bio. Everything's going to be in there. It's also through Train Heroic. So if you go to the marketplace, you can look in the Train Heroic marketplace and look at the Awakening.
Yeah, I'll make sure to put that in the show notes if you want to send me those links so people can find it. A couple more questions, then we'll sign off here. But what are you most looking forward to in the next couple months? I know we're getting a lot of our guys back, either things that you're excited with at work or just personal wise, things that you're looking forward to.
Yeah, like you said, at work, it's kind of just the crew is here now, so now it's like it's time for me to make my mistakes. Um, you know, kind of get out there and see what works and what doesn't, um, and just help them out, like guide them. That's what I'm looking forward to most is just being able to guide the NCO. Um, I took a lot of pride in my intern program. I was an intern coordinator. Um, and the way I kind of see it is you're essentially doing the same thing. You're teaching them. So that's what I'm looking forward to the most is the ability to teach them on the basics of coaching. And then personally, like I said, fishing.
Fishing. Well, let me know next time you go fishing. I'm always down to go fish.
Yeah.
All right. Good deal, man. Any closing thoughts before we sign off?
Yeah, I'm gonna plug um the H2F slash um human performance. I know the Air Force just signed a huge contract with the military. I'm going to plug that for all of the collegiate strength and conditioning coaches. We need good people. We need your expertise. We need your guidance, and it's for a great cause. Like you're helping out people that are serving. You're serving people that are serving. Um, so we need as much help and as much expertise and good people that we can get. So yeah,
Yeah.
and you'll
100.
have plenty of time off. You'll have a social life. You can find a new hobby. You can start a new side business or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think human performance in the military setting is just going to continue to grow, and it's booming right now. It's going to continue to boom. This
Yeah,
quality of life and the impact that you can make with the people that you're working with. So, I
exactly.
100% agree. All right, well, let's sign off here. I appreciate it, Javi. I'll make sure to put all your info in the show notes so people can reach out and check out your program.
Cool. Appreciate you for having me.
Yeah, good deal. Thanks for listening to the Athlete's First Performance Podcast. If you have any questions regarding this episode or future episodes, please be sure to reach out on social media or our website. Both links can be found in the show notes.